Este programa tem o patrocínio Amália in America, TAP Air Portugal, Hotel Praia Sol, Luís Firmini Insurance, Jornal Luso Americano, Go Kart Service, MCM Clinic, Coimbra Restaurant, Top Burger, Quarta Gala, Rádio Corações de Portugal. Welcome to the second episode of Shattered Conviction. With me, my good friend Israel Popolim. Israel, always a pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
Israel, today what are we going to talk about?
Well, today we're going to be talking about something that I think is extremely important, something that I think shattered the social media, kind of was everywhere, and I saw a really big backlash and also to conversation happening over Charlie Kirk's death that happened in the 10th of last month, something that affected me deeply. I didn't agree with everything that Charlie Kirk had to say, but just kind of the message of him going out, having that conversation, going to college campuses, talking to young people like me, it really hit home because he's kind of the embodiment of that let's debate it out, let's talk it out culture, and his death, I think, really meant something.
So, as you mentioned, on September 10th, I personally think as well that the world will be completely different after that day for so many reasons. And I'm glad that you mentioned the impact that he had on the young generation. Sorry, the expression. College kids that love to debate, express opinions. And I think that that is probably the most powerful message that he was able to bring. I'm not necessarily agree with a lot of the things that he was debating and fight for, if we want to put that way. But I thought that whatever work he was done was impactful and at the same time powerful to wake up people's minds, especially the young generation. But let's go to the facts. What happened in that day?
Well, what happened that day is still under debate, and we still have yet to see the court filing. We haven't seen the guy get charged yet. I forgot his name, Thomas.
Gary Robertson, something. Tyler Robertson.
Tyler Robertson, yeah. I don't know where the Thomas came from, but he went out, killed him. Still under debate whether or not he was a leftist. Some people believe he was like a far right groyper. I don't think that's the case. I think it's pretty obvious, at least, that he's a left leaning person. But I think that's a little less important. Mainly because this is kind of a situation that we caught ourselves in where the political discourse has gotten to a point where we lack charitability. Meaning, when I come up to you with a debate point, let's say, for example, something that's very contested, like abortion. If I come to you and talk to you about abortion, let's say I'm a right-leaning, conservative viewpoint where I think life begins at conception, my main point with trying to restrict abortion or ban abortion is not to remove women's right to choose, right? That's not the motivating factor. My motivating factor would be to save the innocent life that I believe is there at conception. Whereas someone on the opposite aisle doesn't believe that fetus has the right to human life or worth moral consideration, even though it has human DNA, but there's like some kind of factor that they're missing there. So they think that the bodily autonomy of the woman supersedes the right of the fetus to live, and they think that that's an acceptable thing. Now, I laid out those two arguments kind of, I think, non-biasedly. I think that's a pretty good representation of what those ideals are. But what you see a lot today in this specific discourse is that if you don't, let's say, agree with a woman's right to choose, you think that abortion should be restricted, your targeting motivating factor is to remove the woman's right. But that's not the motivating factor for that person to have that position. And I think vice versa, where if I believe women have the right to choose, if you talk to like a conservative, let's say conservative Christian, stereotypical, whatever, however you want to characterize the person, they would be like, whoa, you just want to kill babies, when that's not the motivating factor, of my opinion. And I think that is the main thing that we're missing here from going across the aisle and talking to other people. Is it's like we have to look at the root cause for their opinions and not necessarily the conclusion that we create and we like presuppose the conclusion of their argument.
No, I gotta agree with you on that, because I do believe that we attempt to be specific, and from there we are not able to get off. Means that just because I have that opinion. And as you mentioned, the root cause can lead to that means that I will not be able to not even analyze it, whatever happens surrounding that main factor, and therefore I gotta disagree and gotta be one side, and just because of that, I must place you in the other side. I think that the biggest problem that we face in the United States right now, with repercussions throughout the world, is the fact that we are not able to differentiate us from the rest of the people. Means I like to have my opinion. I have no problem to debate my opinion. Necessarily, I don't need to be right about my opinion. And is a turning point. And I'm saying that not just because Charlie Kirk's organization was turning point. It's a turning point that allowed me to grow. Means in a positive way or negative way. Sometimes I feel that I win the debate. Other times I think that, you know what, guess what? The other part was probably better prepared, or his point of view make me come across a different point of view that allowed me to grow or change my perception. And I think that that's exactly where we're going to debate today is, it is fair to be always in one side and not allow ourselves to think differentially or in a different way from the stereotypes that we put in your mind. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say this. It's statistically impossible that you're right about everything, right? It's just impossible. So I think a lot of people, when they think, I guess, partisanly, which would be like black or white, Republican or Democrat, blue or red, a lot of the times they get into a trap where they feel like they need to support positions that necessarily aren't, not defendable, just because they're on the right or just because they're on the left. Like it's like the party issue. I see that a lot, specifically with the with both sides. Like for example, something that this is like a much larger conversation, but someone on the right, a big conversation that was happening throughout the president election of Donald Trump, like in 2020, around those times, was the Jeffrey Epstein files, right? Even when Donald Trump was running with JD Vance was going out and talking about, oh, we're going to release the Epstein files, and then you see kind of the butcher of the Epstein file release in Donald Trump's side. And I noticed a lot of right-leaning people would try to just be like, oh, it's a Democrat hoax, kind of just repeating what Donald Trump said instead of thinking critically. And I guarantee you, if it was Joe Biden doing the same thing, these right-wingers would freak out and say, oh my goodness, the government is covering up this gigantic PDF file ring. And they would be super against that, going on the streets. But I think because it's like the guy has an R next to his name or he has a red tie, like we're going to go and we're going to talk about the problems with the conversation instead of like the overarching conversation of Donald Trump is blatantly blocking the Epstein files. And I'm saying that as a right winger because that's like a very blatant example of it, where people are just kind of partisanly like, oh, right, I'm not going to criticize my side, even though there's fair criticism to be had there.
I think that, and I'm glad that you bring that point. I think that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, they cover the main topic with other topics. Look what happened today. So Bibi and Trump announced 21 points to win the war in Gaza, and Hamas released a statement that we are thinking, we are debating, we're going to have an answer by tomorrow, Thursday. Two news come out immediately. Number one, an order from Donald Trump that if someone does anything against Qatar, that will be against the United States. Hamas leaders are where? In Doha, Qatar. From the other side, in Germany, 3 Hamas members are being detained because they are planning some bad actions against Israeli. So we are not using brains to go through the issues that we are facing. The tendency that we have in both sides, doesn't matter if you are Republican or Democrat, we are so polarized that no matter what, when we see that we become weak for A, B, or C reason, the tendency is to pull up what? Something that can stronger point of views. And I think that that is the biggest problem that we are facing today, because it's not a single conversation that ends, and not necessarily needs to be right or wrong. We can debate. At the end of the debate, you have your opinion, I have my opinion, we move forward. That's the beauty of that. But I think that the biggest problem that with the society that we have today, we're not allowed ourselves to be number two. We gotta win that game no matter what. And that took us to an extreme with the Charlie Kirk death, because I think that whatever we observed from the 10th up till today, it's just hilarious. It's just bad, too bad to be true. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about college camps. You know, what is the feeling of a young student like you when you're facing the reality of what happened in Utah?
Well, I'll tell you, it's very scary. You know, when I was a kid, I would always idealize like going on the college campus, or those people who would go out in public and talk to people and see what like average people think about certain issues. And I think that it's very scary that now you have to, you know, in America, the greatest country in the world, the country that's supposed to be about freedom of speech, about the culture of freedom of speech, you have to be scared to walk around, like to walk around without a bulletproof vest if you're a high-profile figure around populists talking to random people, you know? So it's like it kind of gatekeeps this conversation from, let's say I'm a very famous political commentator. I go out and I talk to a lot of people. Now the conversation with random people is kind of cut off, where I'm not going to go out and seek the opinion of random people on the street. You know, not the people who necessarily engage with my content, because I can always talk to random people who engage with my content, but there's kind of a filter system there, right? So it's like if they're watching my content, they kind of already agree with me, or maybe they're from a similar viewpoint as me, or whatever. That's kind of how the For You page works, you know, on TikTok, Instagram, all these platforms. But when you go out and you speak to random people, particularly because it's kind of a segment of the population. You kind of get a random poll of a random person and what they believe about a topic. And if that gets cut off simply off the fact that your safety is in question, I think that's extremely scary. And it's scary to see how the conversation will evolve now. Because now if that's cut off, to say 20, 30 years, like how much of a disconnect is there going to be between, let's say, the political commentator class versus like the actual governmental class and the regular civilian population? There's going to be a huge disconnect there, and I think that gap can only be filled with kind of these debates, these kind of on the public square, open debates, talking to random people who come up to the mic. Yeah,
that's a very interesting point, and let me bring Jimmy Kimmel to the conversation, right? Because we're talking about Charlie Kirk, a guy that loves to debate people, a guy that, again, disregarding if we agree or disagree, allowed others to express an opinion. I think that for me is probably one of the most powerful definitions of freedom of speech. Means we have a conversation. Forget the outcome, let's have a conversation. Jimmy Kimmel is a monologue. Just one person talks. Where freedom of speech starts and ends when you compare both personalities?
I think. Well, could you clarify your question a little bit more about?
Yes. So we see that a lot of people say that the fact that Jimmy Kimmel was off air for a couple of days, freedom of speech. What was the most impactful freedom of speech in a sense, Jimmy Kimmel or Charlie Kirk? And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking you that question.
I think that it's not a question of like either or. I think it's a question of like cause and reaction, right? For example, for a very long time, and again, and I talk about this as someone who was part of that movement, freedom of speech was something that the right wing especially the young right wing who grew up on Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, those kind of commentators, something that we venerated a lot, right? Come to the square, come to open debate, even though I think Ben Shapiro doesn't really believe in those principles as much anymore. But I would say that those are the kind of the principles we were brought up in. And in terms of seeing a lot of conservatives cheering on the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, for me was just very weird because particularly it's about principles, right? If we pick and choose based off of our opinion or our emotions, then it's not principles. So it's not an actual principle for you. It's more of like I feel better if I'm able to speak, right? Because I want freedom of speech because I want to be able to say crazy stuff. But whenever someone else says crazy stuff that I feel offended about, I want to shut it down. And I think that kind of that wishy-washy, I just really dislike it a lot. So it left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Cool. I think that it's good to have this conversation because I think that, again, going back to the way we started this interaction, it seems that a lot of people forget everything that happened, the lead to that question. But, we're going to go there. I just want to bring to you a topic. The guy that killed Charlie Kirk is the only person guilty in that process.
That's an interesting question. I would say yes, right? He is the person guilty because he's the one who took that next step and actually went out and took violence, took up arms, and killed somebody he disagreed politically. But I think that we have another conversation that kind of coincides with that one, which is kind of like we all killed Charlie Kirk, right? In a way that we all led up to this political environment that we have where we kind of, like I said, we're not charitable with people's opinions. So instead of actually attacking someone's opinions, we'll attack the possibility of where their opinions could lead if we extrapolated enough, or even, and this is a term that I'm coining right now. I call it missile words, right? And the reason I say that is because whenever an argument, think of like an F-16 coming in, it's an argument, an amazing argument, very strong, very powerful, very fast, and instead of actually attacking the argument, right, getting into a dogfight with another F-16, instead you're going to shoot up a missile word that kind of discredits the entire argument based off of the person's either physical characteristics, or I think now more so it's kind of these like racism, sexism, homophobic, Zionist, or like terrorist supporter, or like these kind of words, are like anti-Semite. Most of the time they're used in political sphere to kind of not attack the argument, but attack the person instead. And I think that is the biggest issue that we're having, because whenever you are arguing with the right winger, and the only thing that you're able to bring up is like, oh, you're fascist, racist, sexist, blah, blah, blah. These are the words I'm bringing out here, and I don't even want to engage or grapple with your argument. What happens is some people are going to look at that, like, for example, with me, if you don't have a valid argument, I'm not listening anymore. Like, my ears are closed. Other people will hear that and be like, oh, that's true. This person is those things. And we've been conditioned to hate fascists, or we've been conditioned to not like sexists or racists or any of these other things. So whenever you're using those words, those have like specific meanings. So you have to know what those meanings are and be able to defend why that person is a word, right? Why they are an anti-Semite or a fascist or a racist or a homophobe or whatever. We have to actually be able to argue that, and argue that specific term, and not just use it as a argument over, I'm using this word and it's like I shot down your F-16 and I don't have to worry about anything.
I was reading a blog a few days ago with a very interesting point that that person he wrote that when you cover yourself in an umbrella of ideas, like what you were just mentioned, like a right-wing person that thinks that you are sexist, whatever you want to call. When you cover yourself on that idea, you losing the most powerful attribute that you may have, that is freedom of speech, that allows you to express an opinion, because it's no longer an opinion, becomes what? You become a follower, because what distinguishes a follower from a leader, for example, is the fact that you can expect something new all the time from someone that is there to bring lie to bring ideas. If you just dare to follow, if you just dare just to say it is your fault, and not try to understand why that person can be at fault in that particular moment, but bringing value for other situations, then you losing that. And that's exactly where I'm going, comparing Jimmy Kimmel, the way he returned. I'm gotta tell you that I disagree completely the way he get off from air. I think that he could have done better saying as a comedian, whatever I express was just me being an artist, and I'm fine with that, because you have the right to express whatever you want since you are an artist, right? But how you position Jimmy Kimmel and Charlie Kirk's wife, the way she faced the death of her husband, the way she show up in front of 60,000 people and say, I forgive that person, versus Jimmy Kimmel that did exactly what we've been talking about here, blame somebody else.
Yeah, I think, well, I want to talk about Charlie Kirk's wife first, just because I think what she did was extremely courageous. At the point when Charlie Kirk died, again, because I'm someone who watches content for a long time when I was younger. I'm 21 years old right now, but watched his content for a very long time. So it did hit me hard. Whenever she came out and talked about it, whenever she specifically forgave the person, that was an extremely Christian thing to do. And I'm a Christian, so I can see those kind of actions and really tell that it was a genuine thing. And I know she's getting a lot of flack for the way that they did the memorial service. It was kind of too fantastical, or like too many fireworks. And I understand all those things. I think that like Charlie he probably would have wanted that, depending, because if you look at the way he ran his events for a long time. So
let me just say that Jimmy Kimmel were more fake crying on stage. I'm sorry. I think that was hilarious.
Yeah. And then with Jimmy Kimmel, quite frankly, I don't really like Jimmy Kimmel that much. Right. And the reason I'm defending his freedom of speech is because it's a principle thing for me. So it's like, I don't care what you are or how you talk. I think you have the right to talk, say whatever you want. I don't think you should be canceled or pressured, specifically from people who claim to care so much about freedom of speech as a principle. But with Jimmy Kimmel specifically, right, what he said in particular was what you said. He kind of passing the ball, where I think the exact quote was, them pretending, or like Republicans pretending that he wasn't anything other than them, one of them.
I don't follow him, so I decided not to see him.
Yeah, I don't know if he meant like that he was white or that he was a Republican, because I know his parents were like Mormons.
Correct.
But I think based off the evidence, I think it's pretty clear that he was a left-leaning person. And I think it comes to another thing where people want to deny their shooters, because everyone has shooters. Every ideology has somebody who is extremely radical, someone who is probably what would be the word for like kind of like a narcissist, where they think that they're the ones who've been deemed by God for them to be able to go out and commit an act of violence like this, because they have the ultimate decision making. Like everyone has those types of people, and this kind of blame shifting where it's like, for example, if you're a left-leaning person during Black Lives Matter, during all the riots, or for you to be kind of like downplay, or to be like, but it's not actually. It's like, no, you have to take responsibility for that, and you have to denounce it when it comes to you. Because if you don't denounce it, then all you're doing is creating a space where next time another shooter happens, it happens to be on the other side, they're just going to not denounce it either. And they're just going to kind of deny it or kind of push it to the side and continue the conversation. It's going to get us to a worse and worse place. It's like we had, 3 mass shootings in like a day, in like a 24-hour period. Like this is a real problem that we're having here. And we can have a conversation about the Second Amendment. We can have a conversation about like drugs, like medical, like psychiatric medicine. But ultimately, I think that as a society, we have to call it out. We have to be principled. I know everyone hates that word, but we have to be principled about what we believe in, and call out behavior that is not acceptable.
So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Let's concentrate a little bit on Jimmy Kimmel. What took him off the air? Is that okay to joke somehow about someone's death, specifically the way that happened to Charlie Kirk? Does that make sense? Is that freedom of speech, or getting money for the views?
Yeah,
that you have.
Yeah, I think it is freedom of speech, right? Even if he made a joke that was way worse, let's say like multiply it by 10, that's still freedom of speech. In terms of this specific quote he made, I don't even think he was making like a joke at Charlie's expense. Like he wasn't saying like Charlie's such a dummy, like look what he did this to himself. Like I don't think he said anything like that. It was more so he was calling out Republicans like not taking responsibility that the shooter was a Republican or one of them, which is just false. So I think like his specific quote wasn't like face value like the worst thing I've heard, like especially because I was going through Instagram. I got blocked by some people on my Instagram because I was posting on my story, and I was sliding up.
That's freedom of speech.
Yeah, no, that's freedom of speech. If you're not getting blocked, you're not doing it right. I'll tell you that. But and basically calling out people's behavior, cheering on his death or saying that he somehow incurred it on himself. I think that's a lot worse. That conversation is a lot worse versus what Jimmy Kimmel said. And the joke he made was more so making fun of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump did have a very weird reaction to his death. There was like a quote when he was on the White House lawn and they asked him how he was holding up, and he was like, "Oh, I'm just fine. I'm perfectly fine." It's like, "Oh, I have I'm making a new ballroom in the White House," like right after talking about it. And it was like, it's a little weird. The guy raised a lot of money for you. The guy was a very big advocate for your ideology. He was kind of the media wing of your entire like party. So it's like his reaction was very weird. I think it's fine if Jimmy Kimmel made a joke about that, which he did. It's more so like Jimmy Kimmel doing the shifting blame thing, where it's like he doesn't want to take responsibility. The left doesn't want to take responsibility for this.
Let's hold off a moment here. And what you just saying, right? And I think that is a very interesting point. So, who we need to blame in all this situation? It is the actual administration, Donald Trump. Let's take a look, right? We see Jimmy Kimmel. We're just talking as a comedians towards one topic. We're talking about Jimmy Kimmel. Can talk about somebody else too. Jimmy Kimmel, he has his point of view. He decided to do his show in one way, and that I believe that is freedom of speech. Because if I decided to criticize Donald Trump every day, I have the right to do that. Somebody else can do it on the other side. That's fine, and I do believe that it is a way to win. Whatever we need to win as far as views and so on. But the point here is that, right? Think about if that joke or a halfway joke was about someone related to you. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I would probably feel like worse about it. I would probably be more offended at it, but it's like...
What about if the joke was elaborated on the expression used by somebody else that I don't like it? That's the case of Donald Trump, and for me it was weird too. You're talking about someone that just passed, tragically the way he did.
Days ago.
Moments ago, and you switch your conversation to a ballroom.
I
was like, wait a minute, are you okay? You must probably got to go to a doctor. But think about, right? It's that was not the main topic. Forget the ballroom. The main topic for me was somebody got killed in the way that impact thousands of people. Because everybody that ever attend an event like that in a college campus will be impacted. I will think tomorrow could be me. You know what I'm saying? Like for my kids. I think that when we joke about and when we're talking about freedom of speech, if that became a game to make money, or is really a point of view that we need to keep always present? Because if that is the answer, I no need to cover myself with somebody else's fault like he did.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. I would say mainly that I don't like Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think he's like a good person, like an upstanding moral character. But to put a little bit of defense on him, again, it wasn't like a joke at Charlie Kirk's expense. Like for example, I saw people being like, "Oh, Charlie Kirk like can't dodge," like blah blah blah. Like jokes like that are really messed up. And I think like if he made a joke like that on air, that's another conversation. And at the end of the day, he is at a news network, so if the news network doesn't appreciate what he said, they can fire him, they can suspend his channel. But I think that like the actual statement he made wasn't like that bad in comparison to what we've been seeing all over the internet. And I think a big conversation too with this was the pressure from, I think it was the SEC of Donald
FCC.
Yeah, the FCC. So that is the more troubling part of it, because the First Amendment is there's a distinction between like culturally we should support the First Amendment. Like as Americans, we should understand that there is a culture of that where, again, like you could be talking and the whole time I could be doing this and screaming la 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 in my own ear, and I'm not really listening to you. You're talking, I'm talking. We're both doing freedom of speech, but like that's not really agreeing with freedom of speech by principle. You know, like we should have conversation, we should debate. And then there's like by law where it's like the government should not intervene. And I think if the government is pressuring companies to take someone off the air for a political joke at Donald Trump's expense, or even a political statement that could have been incorrect. I think he made an incorrect political statement saying that the Republicans just don't want to accept their shooter, or like they don't want to accept that he's anything other than him. I think that's just like an incorrect statement. But that's the scary part. That's the main scary part with the FCC pressuring companies.
Let me ask you that question, because you have a valid point, and I kind of agree with you. Like, as I mentioned to you, like for me, it's more the blame. I don't like the blame game, so I think that it's when you were up there in front of cameras, you take oath. You say, and you cover yourself with your personality, assuming what you are saying, because it's you, nobody else. The point that I want to ask you is that does people like Jimmy Kimmel, all these politicians that for me is the worst thing that we have right now in the United States, both sides, no one is good. It's my opinion.
Like I like Thomas Massey.
Yeah, kind of. But let me ask you that question. Facing the reality that we are facing, does people like Jimmy Kimmel, other people, has the responsibility to do something extra based on freedom of speech to prevent that episodes like the one in Utah happen again? Like the one that just happened in the church, like the one that happened with those kids in another school, like almost at the same time. Because, when we're talking about freedom of speech, we also have a responsibility. What we say, the way we say, and the impact that has on others must be measured. Otherwise, when starts and ends, you understand what I'm trying to tell?
I understand what you're saying. I think, yes, we do have a a civil responsibility to go to speak in a manner that's precise, to not use, like I said, those missile words where you're kind of just you're invoking names of previous ideologies that have failed and saying like your whole argument, basically you're a fascist and I'm done with this conversation, or just to like blatantly label people as fascist or Nazi or racist or like communist or socialist. I think we have a responsibility to be precise with our words, debate the topic, the issues, and make sure that we're charitable for other people's opinions. Because I think that is the biggest problem that we're having, is the charitability aspect, where people are extrapolating what you actually mean based off of certain positions.
It's not what was done when the reporter asked Donald Trump about Charlie Kirk and took it the second part of the answer. There was all. I'm not saying, right? For me, that guy needs to go to a doctor, right? Because if you're saying...
Were you talking about when he was on the White House lawn, he was asked about Charlie Kirk?
Yes, because, he did mention before what? He did direct his thoughts to the family, to the death of Charlie Kirk. And then he added that, I don't know, if somebody else asked a different thing, that could be. We don't know. But somebody extracted just what?
That's a fair point.
What is more convenient to make notice? Forgetting what? that particular report, because we have 20 or 30 reporters there, so it's fair to say, and I'm not defending the guy, I think that was completely odd. I just imagine that you are answering somebody else's question and somebody asks something else, because remember, they're going to do a ballroom there. And I don't know, you must have your moments, because there's so many things that you have in your plate. And I'm not saying that. The point here is that, if we just extrapolated what is important for the topic that we have, do we have a responsibility to stop that? No, we can differentiate that from the real meaning of freedom of speech, because that for me is the most important thing. We're just talking about freedom of speech towards one way that is, and not necessarily you, the world in general, everybody, even I probably do that, you do that, in the context that we're not even understanding why we are doing that. But we tending to what? To cover what is most important for us with that specific thing that make us stronger. The weak point, forget about. Is that make sense what I'm talking about?
So
Are we going to
different? Like people will kind of like
just
forget weaker arguments and kind of just go like for example, you said that we had this whole conversation and then they'll clip out like 10 minutes of you talking about something out of context. I just asked you a question and then it's like well, Ricky's crazy. What is Ricky talking about?
I think that freedom of speech for me is a very important thing. I will be able to talk and say something about whatever I think that is important or not important, joking with someone. Look, we see things like that where, I'm your friend, and between our friendship, I tell you something completely odd, and then tomorrow you go out there and you say, he told me that. Is that freedom of speech? Come on.
Well, I mean, I would say, yeah, it is. Is it something? It's a good thing to do. No, it's not always like I can sit here. And
I'm talking about the principles.
No,
right?
of course.
I'm talking about. I'm trying to go to the. I'm trying to go that we as a.
What's a responsible use of freedom of speech?
We are responsible for it.
Yeah, no,
like
there's
an audience.
There's a responsible way to do things and an irresponsible way to do things, right?
That's what I want to.
So it's like it's like you have the right for self-defense, but like also too, if you just like spit on me, I don't have a right to just attack you and like.
I think that this
is
not a self-defense. I think that is common sense. I think that freedom of speech comes with common sense.
Yeah, but it's like the question is like with freedom of speech. What would be the solution to something like that? What would you say? Like, is it a
common
cultural...
sense? Common sense. No.
Well, I mean, common sense isn't so common. I think we know that.
Look, but you understand the point that I try to say is that, right? And I go back to Jimmy Kimmel, go back to Charlie Kirk, right? Because I'm debating with you in a college camp. Somebody shoot me and kill myself, the person that I like it. I'm so sorry, man. Let's use common sense. Let's stop a moment to joke about everything else. Joke about the hot moment that a president had. That's fine. But let's have a little bit of respect.
No, I completely agree with you that there's a level of respect.
That's what I'm talking.
That's a separate conversation from like the absolute like the principle of freedom of speech, because the whole point of freedom of speech is that my respect is different than your respect. So I know with the situation like this, it's very clear. We can be like, it's very disrespectful for you to make fun of the guy who just got killed for doing what he did,
so
talking to people.
You know what FCC means for? Because I go back to what you mentioned, and FCC is a regulator. Is an organ. It's.
Yeah, because cable has their own rules.
No, cable, and I work in the industry for 15 years. They need to obey to certain rules. For example, I cannot just hiring some sexual content, because that will be revised by FCC. I'm just giving you an idea. Rules.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying with Jimmy Kimmel, I think it's different because
11 o'clock at night. It's still some rules.
No, not even 11 o'clock at night. I think it's like from what rule did he violate? From the
I'm not saying. No, I look. I agree with you before. I'm just saying that the fact that it was the FCC the fact that the FCC can use it. Like, we're talking about certain states. In certain states in the United States, you cannot, pornographic movies cannot be in certain markets. All that is regulated by FCC. So I'm not defending FCC. I completely disagree. I think that communication needs to come from FCC, not from somebody else, not from Donald Trump, not from a governor, not from a senator or congressman. Got to be the FCC. And, that's what it is, and we can debate it if it's right or wrong, with certain things. My point here is that, right, we have a responsibility towards the same way that, ABC, Fox, CNN, WNN has the responsibility towards the views. I think that the artists, the journalists, we not only have the responsibility, I think that we have the obligation to understand the impact that we have on others. The moment that we lose that understanding just because it's cool or becomes more affordable or better for us financially, that impact freedom of speech.
Yeah, I think it's like I think a duty, like versus like your rights and a duty. I agree with you. I think that
you can do everything.
You have a duty. You have a duty to do that. I think the American people should hold their political commentators to a high standard. There should be a level of because I think cancel culture is I think we know cancel culture is not really that good of a thing, but there is a level of like, if let's say for example I get up here and I'm constantly just objectively wrong about the stuff I'm talking about. I'm taking stuff out of context. I'm very aggressive and super divisive. Then I understand if people don't want to talk to me or they don't want to listen to me, or I think that is where it should be. It should be the people are dictating what's good or what's bad. That's when,
for example, ABC in Jimmy Kimmel's case, they see the numbers drop. What do?
They get rid of the guy.
Is that freedom of speech?
ABC has the right to take him off, but it's like.
Hold on, that's exactly what ABC I want to get. Right?
They have the right to do that, and same way YouTube has the right to cancel
because they have
people.
a contract.
I don't know what's in his contract,
but you
yeah,
understand.
say,
So
yeah.
it is depending on the way we see. It's so broad, the topic that we are talking, that think about, if ABC tomorrow, the ratings are dropping, and they come to Jimmy Kimmel or somebody else. We're just talking about him, that's why. And they come, you know what, man? Your conversation is bad, or ratings are dropping. NBC, is going up for ABC, so therefore, I cut you. Is that going against Jimmy Kimmel freedom of speech just because we decided, or ABC decided, to take him off the air?
I guess when you phrase it like that, if they're solely going off of ratings or just like we're losing money, so we got to get rid of you, no one wants to listen to you, I understand if they get rid of him. I think, but you have to, what's the root cause of that is people.
What was the root cause? What was the root cause of Jimmy Kimmel to make the comment about Charlie Kirk? Was Donald Trump?
Yeah.
There we go. You see the way we polarize things. So it's not about Charlie Kirk. I think that when somebody gets killed, when we have an horrific assassination attempt or something that happened, something bad, we have the responsibility, people that are behind the cameras, the microphones, to.
No, I think I agree with you. Like for example, let's bring it to someone like Destiny, right? I think Destiny legitimately.
But he says about.
No, he eggs on this kind of violence. He said that, like for example, both of his parents are conservatives. They're from Cuba, so a lot of Cubans are very conservative. He said that if his parents, when Donald Trump got shot originally, if they were in the crowd in that, he said if they were in the crowd during that shooting and they died, they would have deserved it. You know what I mean? Like someone like that, is very destructive to the discourse. I think Destiny is a smart person. If you listen to his streams, you listen to him talk, he obviously knows a lot of. He's making a lot of money, being very divisive. That's 100% true. So you could tell the guy's smart. You can tell the guy knows what he's talking about.
Worth what he orders.
But it's again the thing. It's like, what's your responsibility? And I would say, like, if there was a guy who came out and you saw that he watched a bunch of Destiny's content and he committed a mass atrocity like that, there's a question. This is something that I kind of moved on a little bit from our conversations we had a couple weeks ago. It's like, what responsibility does he have to that when you're specifically egging it on? And I think that's a better example than someone like Jimmy Kimmel, because again, Kimmel made. I understand why you said Jimmy Kimmel, but I think it's a little bit better of an example because Jimmy Kimmel made like a one-off comment, not specifically targeting Charlie Kirk, kind of targeting.
No, he's targeting Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's targeting Donald Trump. So it's
fine.
It's a little different. But with someone like Destiny, where he's literally just like, yeah, Charlie Kirk died, and he makes jokes on his Twitter, or X, not Twitter. But like that itself is disgusting.
I prefer Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, I think Twitter sounds better too. But like, especially someone, because I used to watch a lot of Destiny's content, because I'm someone who watches everyone across the political aisle, because I just enjoy political conversations. And he's someone who's very good at that. He's very good at crossing the aisle and having these debates, adversarial debates. But in terms of the ideology, and that's kind of coming back to what I was talking about before, is the charitability aspect, where he gave an example on one of his streams was, if we're both holding a log and I'm lighting the log on fire and you're lighting the log on fire, why would I turn off my light to stop the log from burning up if you're still holding it? And I'm listening to that, and I'm like, maybe I don't know if it's like, because I'm Christian, I don't think that's the case, because a lot of other people agree with this too. But it's like, that's a destructive ideology. That's a destructive mindset. You're just going to continue bad behavior because the other side is doing bad behavior, and your behavior is dictated based off the other side that you think is immoral. So it's like, what even is morality? Is there a point for being principled? Does morality even have a point in this conversation?
But I think that is extremely important, and I really appreciate your input. The way you express point of views that not necessarily can be an agreement between us, but that's the beauty about be able to talk, be able to express point of views, and be able to open routes that allowed us to be better. And that's exactly what I want to close this conversation. What we can do so we all not kill Charlie Kirk. And again, I'm being generic, not what we can do to prevent a situation like that to happen again.
I think we got to do what Charlie Kirk did. Go out, have these conversations, and show people that the basis of your opinion is not based in bigotry or not based in some kind of other negative attribute. It's based off of logic and reason, and coming to the table with your points of view, with your facts, and having that conversation. And I think that is the most important part. There's always going to be there's always going to be the shooters. There's always going to be people who aren't able to articulate their problems, and they rather pick up arms and fight. But us as Americans, we have to set a standard and follow the standard. Otherwise, there's no point of having a standard. And our democracy, our country, is based off good faith discussion. It's based off of moral populists who are able to have standards. And like I said, standards means that you do it over and over again. It's not based off your whims. It's not based off what side is doing the political violence. It's based off of when you see violence, you disavow it. When there is a conversation, you have it, and you don't bow down to these missile words, as I said before, where people are just using attributes or invoking the name of previous ideologies to kind of shoot down your argument. Or if you notice yourself doing that, stop doing that. If you're using these buzzwords, anytime you hear a buzzword, most of the time you're like, okay, where did this person hear this from? Is this something that they're just repeating because they heard it before? I think it's like learning those cues of like, okay, when a buzzword is being deployed, what does that even mean? Does this person know what they're meaning by when they're saying this? And trying to get to that, I forgot who it is. It's the Socratic method of like, you believe that everyone wants to do good. Correct. It begs the question, what is good? But if we do have that assumption that, most people want to do good. Most, not everyone. I disagree with Socrates a little bit, but most people want to do good. And kind of understanding that and using that as a basis point of understanding why someone holds a position. And when you understand why someone holds a position, maybe you can actually, argue with them. You can finally find that common ground because you know where the battle's at. Because if we're talking about abortion, for an example, and you're like, let's say like we're having a conversation, we're both being bad faith, and all I have to you, let's say you're very pro-abortion, I'm just like, you just love killing babies, or you're just a baby murderer, right? The conversation's never going to get to a point where we can understand each other.
Correct,
never.
because
you don't,
you're not allowed me to develop whatever I need to develop
Exactly.
to come to a close
or
point.
vice versa. If you're just like, you just want to stifle women's rights, when it's like, no, maybe the conclusion to my argument may be something that does stifle women's rights based off your perception of it, because you think women have the right to choose, and that's a right women have. I would disagree, but that is where the conversation is being held.
Should stay, yeah.
You know, and that's where it should be, and we should have a good faith discussion to figure out the truth statement to that. Like, what's the inner truth, not just the outer, conversation. What's the inner truth of like what their position is?
And I'm so glad, because for me, this is what we are doing here, freedom of speech. And I think that everyone out there should elaborate on this instead of just follow what somebody else says. And that is important, because you want that your message come across, right? But I think that a dialogue between parts is the most important factor on our Second Amendment, is the most important thing as far as what the Constitution of the United States gives us as right. That is, get out there, bring your point, as we say, make sure that be ready for the bullets, because, probably will be people that will be fighting your point of view, but that's the beauty of be able to discuss. And I think that what we are doing here, especially you, as a young kid, 21 years old, I really appreciate, Israel, the fact that someone with you, with a strong personality, allowed us out there to understanding that as a human being, we can evolve. You mentioned to me on the first time that I spoke with you that, you have a point of view that evolved to a different point of view. And that's the most important thing that I believe freedom of speech are giving to us, is the ability to elaborate and be a better person, or at least be able to speak better tomorrow, and stop being someone that is just doing that because somebody else is doing, versus the one that have a strong point of view and is ready for the fight, because these type of fights are the most important fights that allow those guys at home to what? To evolve. And that's, I believe, that is the most important thing. Your closing statement. Look at me. I look like a politician now.
Yeah, no, I would vote for you. You got my vote. Yeah, I think, honestly, what you said is a very good closing statement in itself, and it's really about that charitability, really about that conversation, and to try to get to the deeper truth of what someone's trying to say. And I think just with that itself, like just that principle, if you go through that framework, right? Listen to an argument, see if it's logical or not, if it has any logical fallacies, or if the facts are wrong, like go through the due diligence to make sure someone's correct. If someone makes a good point, sometimes you don't have to just say, oh, you're right 100%. Sometimes you go back to the like Slim Shady said, go back to the lab again. You can cook a little bit more, understand your positions a little bit more, do a little bit more research, and be willing to have your convictions shattered. Because it's like that's part of this whole democracy thing. It's part of this whole thing that we've evolved to. Because as humans, right, we start off with tribes, you get into kingdoms, serfdoms, and then we go into other different forms of industrialization, like crazy. Like we've evolved to a point where now we're in a democracy. We can be in civil society. We can sit down at a table, wearing fancy suits and having a conversation with each other. And I think that's so beautiful that we have that right now, and especially this time and period. And specifically with mass media, where there's a magic machine that's able to broadcast this conversation to potentially millions of people. We have to take advantage of that and use it in the right way, and we have a responsibility to use that in the right way. And it's not to say that, like we need to start banning people, or we need to start getting the government to round up people who make fun of Charlie Kirk's death. But it's we have a responsibility to call out bad behavior, and we have a responsibility to be that light, be that lighthouse, to show other people how to act and how to talk about these situations. Because again, it comes with that principle point where it's nice to have this conversation today, and then let's say tomorrow I'm talking crap again about calling everyone stupid or whatever. Again, it's like we have to be principled, and I think that is the biggest thing. And I think that it's particularly as a Christian, that's something that is ingrained into you. It's something that you're supposed to be principled in what you believe and what you should be doing, how to treat other people. And I think that we need to be principled in how we're doing that in order for us to have a productive conversation, have this democracy thing work. We don't want to de-evolve.
Israel, thank you. Rome, that was the second episode of Shattered Conviction. We will come back next week with another hot topic to put your brains at work. Stay tuned.